my friends, it's almost time. We are so close to the launch of Tears of the Kingdom. We are so near that Nintendo is dropping major details and big bombs on us from the developers of the games themselves, making sure that we are as prepped and ready to go for Tears of the Kingdom as humanly possible. And this is really exciting and at times scary stuff. And you know that we're very close because Nintendo would not be dropping this knowledge unless we were like 100 hours away from when we're all playing Tears of the Kingdom and can bask in Hyrule. And the Zonai, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but we'll bow before the Zonai and play this thing soon. But what's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. Let's jump straight into this. If you're excited for Zelda, hit that like button. Nintendo doing a developer interview series, real big detail, and almost behind the scenes in a way that I think is extra cool. Today's, though, is so weird and so unique. This just dropped. I had to cover it with you. Nintendo is really trying to set Tears of the Kingdom apart. Amongst the pantheon of Zelda games, what makes Tears of the Kingdom unique? And what were the developers trying to achieve with this game, and how do they see it set apart from Breath of the Wild and the rest of the Zelda arsenal? Now, we know that Zelda has been defined by unique objects before, right? Ocarina with its ocarina, Majora's Mask with its mask, Skyward Sword with its annoying sword, Wind Waker with its boat and Wind Waker, Tears of the Kingdom with a hand. Fujibayashi says titles in the Legend of Zelda series intertwine all the elements of gameplay, mechanics, and story and combine them all into a single game. For this title, we chose hands as the key theme to bring them all together. The key theme of Tears of the Kingdom, the differentiating factor, is hands. You're going to see hands all over this game. In fact, it's one of the most important, biggest pieces of the game is Link's hand. He doesn't have a conductor stick to wake the wind. He doesn't have an ocarina to play the Song of Time, but he does have a hand, which I believe he always had. But this hand is special because it says the abilities that Link uses to solve puzzles are all released from his hand. We even included this symbolically in the game's mechanics, such as having scenes that use hands when opening special doors. This hands theme also crops up here and there as a key element as the story develops. Hands. I don't know why, but I can't help but laugh at this. The fact that Nintendo was like, what is the defining thing of Tears of the Kingdom? And they're like, well, it's definitely not the tears. And it's definitely not the kingdom. It's the hands. Hands iconography, though, it's true. It's everywhere. Ultra Hand is a hand. There's hand symbols all over the map and the world. Link's hand has been a focal point. His whole arm has been a big part of marketing and trailers and mysteriousness all since the beginning of this game's announcement. So it's really, really cool to see that they picked hands. I don't know. I just can't imagine the meetings. I think it's just so cool. Dota goes on to say the previous game was a relatively lonesome game, or rather an endurance game where you made full use of Link's body and strength alone to traverse the vast world. What's unique this time is joining hands and cooperating with various characters, and at times creating items with Link's own hands and utilizing them as you progress. And that's where it all comes together. This goofy idea now brought together by Dota, which is brilliant. And if you don't know who Dota is, it says right up here, Takahiro Dota is the Entertainment Planning and Development Department Programming Management Group. Real small print there, man. What the heck is this, a Steam Deck? Anyhow, they're confirming companions and cooperating with various characters throughout the adventure and linking hands with them to show camaraderie and to show co-op. It's not co-op in the sense that you and I can play, but you can play with characters in the game. And at times creating items with Link's own hand. And that's where Ultra Hand Infuse comes in, right? I didn't think about it this way until Dota said it, but you really are creating with Link's own hands the solutions to the world, right? You're creating the vehicles with his hand, his Ultra Hand, I guess. You're creating the weapons. You're fusing a mushroom to a shield with Link's hands. His hands, this whole idea of crafting, of building, of coming together, it does all fit. And they go on to say that we express the hands theme by implementing hand claps and such in the game's music. So there's new hand clap, sound clap. Let me get that hand clap. Who's that by? Hurricane Chris? Simply put, hands expresses the idea of connecting, says Aonuma. This applies to the story too, which connects to Hyrule's past. It also talks about a major struggle called the Imprisoning War, which until now was considered a myth. And the protagonist's name is Link. It's all coming together. These guys are real smart over there. It's funny how these things work out. They're laughing about it too, because it's interesting that something as obscure and weird as hands really could tie the entire thing together. Really could be how Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are linked, and how Tears of the Kingdom sets itself apart, and how Tears of the Kingdom will be defined when we look back. They want us to think of hands as what separates this game. Minish is the cap. Tears of the Kingdom is going to be hands. They say are there certain fundamental things that you wouldn't change because it's a sequel and becomes a matter of creating something new within those existing boundaries. Aonuma says we set those boundaries ourselves, but new gameplay elements are born when we break through them. So we are breaking boundaries. Turns out that a lot of boundaries were pretty durable. Sounds like it was pretty tough for them to introduce new ideas in this game, given that it is a sequel, given that it does take place in the same world of Breath of the Wild, but I think they figured it out. On the other hand, the sound maintained just the right number of similarities with the previous title so that it feels like an adventure in the same world. Exactly, we intended to keep iconic sounds in the previous title, such as the sounds that play when you obtain an item. Now they're talking more about music. They talk about the music a lot, and they kind of avoid the mechanics, I think, because they don't want to give too much away. But I think it's pretty clear based on what we've read, based on the previews, that there are fundamental mechanical changes. I mean, you have a whole new suite of powers, and the whole idea of hands and building and crafting and creating, that is entirely new. They go on to say, no matter how everything else changes, when you hear those sounds, you'll think Legend of Zelda. Yep, more music. There was one approach to make changes to remove that deja vu feeling, and there was another to keep things the same because that's the way they should be. Was everyone on the development team on the same page from early on about the two approaches? So it does sound like they had a big rift in the boardroom. Fujibayashi says, Fujibayashi, who is he? Fujibayashi is the Entertainment Planning and Development Department Production Group. Okay, again, he's just another head of a different group. Not in the slightest. There were many instances, even later on in development, where we struggled to differentiate the two. It was a constant and difficult process where we and the development team continued to mull over and discuss until we all came to an agreement. Takezawa says, we often experienced strong deja vu, particularly in the early stages, and we thought it was imperative to transform how the game felt as much as we could. So early on, they had strong deja vu. I'm betting that this game began without Ultra Hand. I would bet you that what happened was they were making Breath of the Wild 2, and they were trying to see how this would come together, right? Very early planning stages, pre-production. And somebody was watching YouTube. I'm not even kidding. Somebody was watching YouTube and seeing all of the ways people were breaking the game, creating weird things to launch themselves in the sky, making the game their own, and making, that's the key word, making. And I bet you somebody came back from a long night on YouTube and was like, you know what? You know what would be great for this game? If we incorporated all that fans have been doing in Breath of the Wild and made that a central point. I really believe that's what happened here. He said, we worked hard with that thought in mind, but once we got to a certain point in development, we were able to identify areas that would lose their appeal if we changed them. Okay, so they did find things that they should keep the same, and I bet that's why it's still an open world game. I bet that's why the Bokoblin is still the central enemy. I bet that's why there are many elements, like the world itself, that do retain continuity between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But I'm telling you, if they're telling us that early on they had strong deja vu and it was very difficult to decide how much they should change or how little they should change, I bet us as players are the ones that inspired the change, which is really cool. And then you take it with the hands, and I don't want to get all soapy and sentimental with you. Let's all, pull out our Kleenex. But I think that we may have been the linking hand that helped bridge Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom. Just think about that for a second. The concept of this game is hands cooperating to solve the world together, and I think we may have helped the team do that indirectly. Fujibayashi says we started to think positively by calling what we decided not to change the great mundanity. So it's mundane because it's the same, but they're giving it a special title so it doesn't feel too deja vu. Takezawa says, by the end, the definition of the great mundanity became clear. So even if a team member approached us about a deja vu feeling, we felt more comfortable asking them to intentionally keep something unchanged. So that's very interesting. There were people that wanted to maybe change things because it felt similar, but they defined what we want to stay the same from Breath of the Wild. It's really cool to see that this is so thought out. I mean, obviously, games are thought out, but to know the people, the minds behind our favorites, to know the minds behind the 100 hours we're going to spend in this new but similar world, and to know that they had it very set, and they had a plan, and they purposefully left things similar and changed things different based on a real big, long-form discussion, maybe over even years. I think that just bodes so well for the game, and it's great to know that they were eventually all on the same table. Aonuma says, video game development is always like that. when various pieces come together and things start clicking into place, there's a moment when this is fine becomes this is it. And I'm telling you, once they got Ultra Hand and made all the connections with hands in the game, that's when it hit. They probably had ideas about the Zonai story, about Zelda getting lost, about things of that sort, about Calamity changing the world, about the imprisoning war, maybe even about the Skylands themselves. But I'm telling you, it's the Ultra Hand and the Fuse that they picked up from the world around them, fused to Breath of the Wild, and then Tears of the Kingdom finally became this is it. I think this is so dope and so cool, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video going through how these developers really progressed this game and turned it into Tears of the Kingdom. What an interesting story, and we have to freaking play it. How freaking sweet. Can we please get there? Can we please get there? It's almost time. It's almost time. Make sure to subscribe so you're ready for all the great Zelda content, and until next time, everybody, thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Love you lots. SwitchForce,